Have you ever thought about the woman who stood beside Moses long before he became a leader? This is the complete story of Zipporah, Moses' mysterious first wife. Zipporah's got a wild story, full of grit, love, and unexpected twists. From a chance meeting at a well to stepping in when Moses needed her most, she played a part that's often overlooked. Let's dig into her real story. Zipporah, Moses' first wife, wasn't just any woman. She came from the land of Midian, a place with its own customs and beliefs. She was the daughter of Jethro, a priest in Midian, so she grew up in a world of spiritual influence. But she wasn't the quiet background type. Zipporah's first appearance? She's literally stepping in to help her sisters at a well, driving away some pushy shepherds. It's not your typical intro, right? But what was Moses doing there? After killing an Egyptian taskmaster who was beating a Hebrew slave, Moses fled Egypt to escape Pharaoh's wrath. He ended up in the desert region of Midian, a land far from the political turmoil of Egypt. This was a time of great transition for Moses, who had gone from being a prince in Pharaoh's court to a fugitive. In Midian, he was a stranger with no connections, no resources, and no clear future. Moses arrived at a well in Midian, where he saw 7 women, sisters including Zipporah, trying to draw water for their father's flock. But things weren't going smoothly. Some aggressive shepherds showed up and tried to drive the women away, claiming the well for themselves. This kind of behavior wasn't uncommon, as wells were critical for survival in the desert, and disputes over water rights were frequent. Moses, who had just arrived on the scene, wasn't one to stand by and watch injustice unfold. In a bold move, he intervened, driving away the shepherds and helping the women draw water for their flocks. This act of bravery and kindness was Moses' first encounter with Zipporah, though the text doesn't mention if they spoke much at this point. Still, this moment made a lasting impression on Zipporah and her sisters. After Moses helped the sisters, they returned home to their father, Jethro. When Jethro heard how a stranger had defended his daughters and helped them, he was impressed. He asked why they hadn't invited the man to their home. The sisters, likely eager to repay Moses for his kindness, quickly went back to the well to bring him home. Moses was then invited to stay with Jethro and his family, and it didn't take long for him to settle into life in Midian. Jethro, appreciative of Moses' actions and likely seeing potential in him, offered one of his daughters, Zipporah, to Moses in marriage. Zipporah and Moses were married, and their union marked a significant chapter in Moses' life. Zipporah's name, which means bird or little bird, might hint at her nature, free-spirited, strong, and perhaps independent. While the Bible doesn't give us many details about their wedding, the act of Jethro offering Zipporah to Moses shows that this was a union based on mutual respect and gratitude. After their marriage, Moses settled into life as a shepherd, working for Jethro and raising a family with Zipporah. They had 2 sons, Gershom, whose name reflects Moses' sense of being a foreigner in a strange land, Exodus 2:22, I have been a stranger in a foreign land, and Eleazar, named to reflect Moses' gratitude that God had delivered him from Pharaoh. While their marriage began in the relative peace of Midian, it wasn't without its challenges. Zipporah and Moses lived a simple life until the moment God called Moses at the burning bush, setting him on the path back to Egypt to free the Israelites. As Moses accepted his destiny, Zipporah would soon find herself part of a mission she may not have anticipated, one that took her far from home and tested her in unexpected ways. Their meeting and marriage were rooted in circumstances that combined kindness, bravery, and the hospitality of a desert people. But as we've seen, this was only the beginning of a much bigger journey for both Zipporah and Moses. One day, while tending his father-in-law's sheep, Moses stumbles upon a sight that would change everything, a bush burning yet not consumed. It's here that God speaks to him, calling him to go back to Egypt and free the Israelites from slavery. You can imagine the kind of shockwave this news would send through Moses' family. He was about to go back to the land he fled from in fear, to face the most powerful ruler of the time, and demand the freedom of an entire nation. Zipporah, now the wife of a man called to such a dangerous mission, would find herself in the middle of a story much bigger than she probably ever imagined. But before we get into her crucial role in Moses' mission, let's pause and think about what her life must have been like during this time. Zipporah wasn't an Israelite, she was a Midianite, and this fact alone makes her role in Moses' life even more complex. As Moses began to reconnect with his Israelite heritage and prepare to lead the Hebrews out of Egypt, Zipporah would have been navigating her sense of identity. She was a foreigner, married to a man who was about to take on a destiny tied deeply to a people and faith she didn't grow up with. Her father was a priest in Midian, and while the Bible doesn't give us detailed insight into Midianite religion, there's a good chance it wasn't entirely aligned with the God of Israel. So imagine the inner conflict. Her husband was called by the God of his ancestors to a divine mission, while her own family's spiritual practices likely pulled her in another direction. Yet, despite any potential tension, Zipporah stays by Moses' side, and her loyalty to him becomes undeniable in the next major moment in their story. There's a strange, almost cryptic passage in the Bible about Zipporah that scholars still debate to this day. After Moses receives his mission from God and prepares to head to Egypt, something unexpected happens. Exodus 4:24-26. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me," she said. So the Lord let him alone. On the journey back to Egypt, God sought to kill Moses. Yep, you heard that right. God, who just called Moses to lead his people, suddenly comes after him to end his life. The passage doesn't explain why, but it's one of the Bible's most mysterious moments. Here's where Zipporah steps in. In a quick and decisive act, she grabs a flint knife and circumcises their son, touching Moses' feet with the blood and saying, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." Instantly, the threat to Moses' life is gone. Now, this scene raises a lot of questions. Why did God seek to kill Moses? The best guess is that Moses had neglected the covenant of circumcision for his son, which was a major part of the Israelite identity and God's command to Abraham generations before. Circumcision was a physical mark of God's covenant with his people, and by not circumcising his son, Moses may have been seen as failing in his obedience. But why was Zipporah the one to step in? This moment shows Zipporah's quick thinking and bravery. Not only does she take immediate action, but she also carries out a ritual that would have been more familiar to Moses' heritage than hers. It's a powerful scene where Zipporah steps out of her cultural background to uphold the covenant Moses may have overlooked. And in doing so, she saves his life, ensuring that he can continue his mission. Zipporah's role in this moment can't be overstated. Though her actions are brief, they're critical. This wasn't an era when women were often given major roles in the narratives of men's lives, especially in ancient texts. Yet here, Zipporah plays the hero, stepping in when even Moses, the leader chosen by God, falls short. But what happened after this event? Did Zipporah continue with Moses to Egypt? The Bible's not entirely clear on this. What we do know is that at some point during Moses' journey back to Egypt, Zipporah and their two sons, Gershom and Eleazar, were sent back to her father, Jethro. Some believe this was for their safety, as Moses was about to confront Pharaoh, while others think it could have been a moment of separation due to the tension caused by the circumcision event. Whatever the case, Zipporah and her sons were later reunited with Moses after the Israelites escaped from Egypt. Exodus 18:1-2. Now Jethro, the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses, heard of everything God had done for Moses and for his people Israel, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. After Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her. Exodus 18:5-6. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness, where he was camped near the mountain of God. Jethro had sent word to him, "I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons." This brief mention shows that despite any earlier separation, Zipporah remained an integral part of Moses' life and the family unit, though she largely stayed in the background from that point on. So, what's the takeaway from Zipporah's story? Even though she only appears a handful of times in the biblical narrative, her impact is undeniable. She was a woman of action, stepping up when it mattered most. In a world dominated by men and patriarchal structures, Zipporah carved out a role for herself as a protector and savior, ensuring that Moses could fulfill his calling. As a Midianite married to an Israelite leader, Zipporah was a cultural outsider, but she found her place within Moses' story. Her actions bridged the gap between her heritage and her husband's faith, making her a unique figure in the biblical narrative. In many ways, Zipporah's story reflects the struggles of women throughout history, balancing loyalty to family, navigating cultural divides, and finding their voice in moments that matter. She may not have led armies or performed miracles like some of the more well-known figures in the Bible, but Zipporah's quiet strength and decisive action in a life-or-death moment left a lasting mark on the story of Moses and the history of Israel.